Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 355. In this episode, we are continuing our journey through the fall of Númenor by exploring the increasing division in Númenor as reflected by the Númenorean colonies of Umbar and Pelargir, as well as the resurgence of Sauron. Before we get started, I'd like to give a double up air five to our amazing fellowship. That's right, it's that time. Stick 'em up. 3, 2, 1. Whoopsh. Boom. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, SaberSystems, Melkor27, and KG. Also, a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in November of 2023, Paige H., Matthew F., Michael L., Alaskan Moose 31, Brian H., Chris B., and Daniel S. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the years. Join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps us to keep on evering on and lands you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad. If you're watching, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below. Finally, attention binge listeners, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us keep on evering on. All right, we're kind of in the middle of a mad dash to finish the fall of Númenor before the end of the year. This is, I think, going to be the third episode in 1 week, which haven't really been hitting that pace since the early days of the Tolkien Road, but trying to keep that up until we get to the end of the fall of Númenor, which hopefully will be sometime right before Christmas. So stick close and try to stay on top of things. All right, well, in this episode, we'll explore key events during the reign of Tar-Ancalimon, as well as briefly review the reigns of several Númenorian rulers that followed. We'll learn of Númenor's increasing spiritual and moral decay and the increasingly contentious power situation in the once peaceful island kingdom. The original sources for this portion are primarily Unfinished Tales, Lord of the Rings Appendices, A Calabaith, of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, and The Peoples of Middle-earth, which is Volume 12 of the History of Middle-earth. All right, so we're picking up where we left off with Tar-Ancalimon as the ruler of Númenor. As you'll recall from the last episode, Tar-Ancalimon ruled from 2221 to 2386 in the Second Age. Tar-Ancalimon was the 14th ruler of Númenor. During Tar-Ancalimon's reign, we get these two notes from the Tale of Years. First of all, in 2280, Umbar was made a great fortress. All right, Umbar was made a great fortress. And then in 2350, Pelargir is built, and it becomes the chief haven of the faithful Númenorians. So just to give you perspective on where these two places really are, let's look at our handy-dandy map of Middle-earth. So actually, Umbar is somewhat far to the south off this map. You can't really see it on here. It goes off the edge, but it's continued coastline down south of Gondor, even south of where it says South Gondor, and to the west of near Harad here. So Umbar is way off to the south in this region, and then Pelargir, you can maybe see it on the map here. It's a little bit up stream from the mouth of the Anduin. Just maybe, what is that, about 100 miles south of what we'll come to know as Osgiliath, Minas Tirith. Pelargir is this settlement upstream from the mouth of the Anduin. And so these are the two locations we're talking about, but we really learned that the Númenorians during this period, they're putting a lot of these sorts of strongholds, colonies on the coasts of Middle-earth. During this period, we read something very troubling, and that is that the Númenorians become as lords and masters versus helpers and teachers. They are sending the wealth of Middle-earth back to Númenor. And I have really, for a long time, I have really talked about how this is, I think, one of the key signs of Numenor's decay. That they are going from this mindset of, hey, we can be of aid to these men who are not from Numenor, who have not lived here, who were not given all these gifts, and we can help our our long lost brethren or our distant cousins. We can lift them up from maybe the oppression of the shadow that they've been suffering under for a long time. And I think in a large part that was maybe the mentality of Numenor early on. And that was the mission I think they were meant to discover. But during this period and, maybe for the last several hundred years before this, they had really been changing from that mindset of, hey, we can set people free, we can help them, to, hey, we have a lot of money to make here, we have a lot of power to gain here for our own advantage, rather than actually helping the people who live under the shadow. So this is really very tragic. But what we also learn is that this division that we have been talking about for the last few episodes of the Kingsmen versus the Kingsmen versus the Elf Friends is really kind of growing greater and greater as time goes on. Not sure why my Kindle isn't refreshing there, but maybe we'll try to bring it up over here on our screen. There we go. All right, so bring it over here just a little bit. Did that change it? Nope. Okay, well, all right. So anyway, if you're watching on video, you can see it on my screen here. But the Elf Friends, who are the Númenorian, the smaller Númenorian party that really wants to keep close ties to the traditions that came before them. They want to keep close ties to the west, to the Blessed Realm. They took little part in the evil that the other Númenorians were doing, right? The Kingsmen were doing. Let's see here. Did that possibly fix it? No, still no dice. Okay. So you know what? I think I have two different Kindle apps open on my desktop, but whatever. We'll use the one that's on the screen here. All right, so let's read a little bit about what was going on here. In all this, the Elf Friends had small part. They alone came now ever to the north and the land of Gil-galad, keeping their friendship with the elves and lending them aid against Sauron. But the king's men sailed far away to the south, and though the kingdoms and strongholds they have made left many rumors in the legends of men, the Eldar know not of them. Only Pelargir they remember, for there was the haven of the Elf Friends above the mouths of Anduin the Great. So, yeah, the Elf Friends did not really take part in this oppression of the men of Middle-earth. And, that really shows you how they were different from the King's Men. Númenor, by this point, the majority had become all about exploiting Middle-earth, exploiting the men of Middle-earth who were weaker, who were disorganized, and the Elf Friends did not want any part of that. So we get this increasing division in Númenorian society. And I do really believe that there were good guys, right? The Elf Friends, they were the good guys, if anybody's the good guys in all of this. All right, so all at the same time, Sauron is growing stronger, and the ring wraiths are attacking the various Númenorian strongholds. Sauron is still really growing primarily in the east. So if we think about Mordor, really, he's maybe turning some attention, just trying to keep the Númenorians on notice. He's maybe attacking a little bit, against their strongholds, trying to keep them from coming too far in. But really, his main interests lie in building up his power to the east in this direction, because really there's nobody over there. So he can kind of slowly build up his armies. And we know, right? We know that Sauron, he wants to eventually go this way, right? He wants to attack back into Eriador. He wants to do away with the elves over there, and eventually he wants to push the Númenorians away as well, so that he can have lordship over the entirety of Middle-earth. So we get this deepening divide between the Elf Friends and the King's Men, And we learned that during this time, one of the other marks that happens is that we get the king Ar-Andunakor, who we're really going to talk more about in the next episode. But he refers to himself. He takes a name in Andunaic, which is in Númenorean form, so instead of Quenya, and he names himself the Lord of the West. And so, you hear these kinds of names, and, this is like, that name is almost like an affront against the Valar, right? The people of the Blessed Realm, because he's almost asserting that he is Lord over that part of the world. So we can really see how, it's gone from simply ignoring the traditions of the past to this antagonism towards the elves and towards the Valar ultimately. And eventually all of the rulers will take their names in Andunaic, right? Andunaic. Adunaic. Yes, Adunaic. I was thinking of Anduin. Adunaic. All right, well, let's read a little bit more about what Sauron is up to during this time. Now Sauron's lust and pride increased until he knew no bounds, and he determined to make himself master of all things in Middle-earth, and to destroy the elves, and to compass, if he might, the downfall of Númenor. He brooked no freedom nor any rivalry, and he named himself Lord of the Earth. A mask he still could wear, so that if he wished, he might deceive the eyes of men, seeming to them wise and fair. But he ruled rather by force and fear, if they might avail. And those who perceived his shadow spreading over the world called him the Dark Lord and named him the enemy. And he gathered again under his government all the evil things of the days of Morgoth that remained on earth or beneath it, and the orcs were at his command and multiplied like flies. Thus the black years began, which the elves call the days of flight. In that time many of the elves of Middle-earth fled to Lindan, and thence over the seas, never to return. And many were destroyed by Sauron and his servants. But in Lindan Gil-galad still maintained his power, and Sauron dared not as yet to pass the mountains of Ered Luin, nor to assail the havens. And Gil-galad was aided by the Númenorians. Elsewhere Sauron reigned, and those who would be free took refuge in the fastnesses of wood and mountain, and never fear pursued them. In the east and south well nigh all men were under his dominion, and they grew strong in those days and built many towns and walls of stone, and they were numerous and fierce in war and armed with iron. To them Sauron was both God and king, and they feared him exceedingly, for he surrounded his abode with fire. So Sauron, amongst these people who live in the darkness of the east, really becomes as this like great god king over them, right? Just seems, you just imagine being people who are not, aware of much more beyond what kind of goes on in the little realm, and you have this great lord, this great figure who asserts his dominance over you, and just how terrifying and frightening and oppressive that must have been. So Sauron is really building up his preparation for eventually another push against the forces of the West that had defeated him almost at this point. We're not too far away from coming up on 1,000 years prior. Right now we're sitting about, like 600, 700 years since the War of the Three Rings. And Sauron, so in that time, he's really built up his dominance. And you think about that in the terms of lifespan of men, of like normal men, and the men who he has a power over would have, if there was ever any rumor that he had been defeated in the West, they would have that would all seem like a very distant legend to those men, right? They were not connected to, they wouldn't have been like very closely connected to the men of the West, to the elves certainly. And so, in their short lifespans, if any of them had been, it would have been like a distant, legend, almost like, oh yeah, that's a myth. Sauron has always been in charge. So, we can see how Sauron is able to assert so much dominance over that part of the world. Well, so that's what's going on with Sauron. That's what's going on with the Númenorians. And what really happens over the course of the next several centuries is we get several kings and a queen who are really somewhat insignificant, following on Tar-Ancalimon. So we're going to run through these and kind of mention whatever there is of note about them. But to me, that's simply a mark of the decline of Númenor at this point, right? Their lords, say what you will about Aldarion, he was a very, very impressive figure. And, with all of the, early rulers of Númenor, there was a certain, at least tradition of marks of humility for the kingship that, that really distinguished them from these later rulers. And these later rulers, it's like they don't even, for all of their power and their glory at their hands, they don't really do much. I think that in itself is enough of a commentary on the decadence and the decline that Númenor has really embraced at this point. So let's discuss some of these rulers here. So the first one is Tar-Ancalimon. So Tar-Ancalimon, pull that back up here. Tar-Ancalimon was the son of Tar-Ancalimon. Tar-Ancalimon lived for 390 years and reigned from 2386 to 2526, and his name meant silver-handed. It says here, hereafter the kings ruled in name from the death of their father to their own death, though the actual power passed often to their sons or counselors. In the days of the descendants of Elros waned under the shadow. He was named silver-handed because of his love of silver, and he bade his servants to seek ever for mithril. So he loved silver. We can think of mithril as being this very precious, very expensive substance. And so he seeks for that. That's kind of his goal in life, we might suppose. But I find it also interesting that these kings, these rulers, are not really doing the ruling, that they are, more probably living the good life while other people do their bit, do the ruling on their behalf, which you can see how that can cause all kinds of problems itself. Instead of having a ruler who's in charge of everything, you just have these little factions and divisions, kind of people who maybe are right under him, doing these different things, going after their own goals in the name of the king, and he's just kind of sitting back enjoying the good life. So Tar-Ancalimon rules for 140 years, and just to give you an idea, 140 years, that is the shortest reign span so far, with the exception of Tar-Ancalimon, and it's going to get even shorter next with Tar-Vanimelde. And Tar-Vanimelde is the daughter of Tar-Ancalimon. Let me double check that. Actually, I didn't verify that before I went live with this episode. I'll just double check that here. Yes, Vanimelde. Vanimelde, kind of a cool name. All right, Tar-Ancalimon. Yes, so Vanimelde was the daughter of Tar-Ancalimon. Vanimelde lived from 2277 through 2637, so 360 years, and she ruled from 2526 to 2637, so 111 years. So we're approaching that 100-year reign span. So isn't it interesting that even as they refuse to give up power, their reigns become shorter and shorter? They refuse to give up power, therefore their reigns start to become shorter and shorter and shorter. So, and in fact, Vanimelde will be the last of the Númenorian rulers to have a reign span over 100 years. So very, very interesting and significant reign in a negative way there. Now, she gave little heed to ruling, loving rather music and dance, and the power was wielded by her husband, Herukalmo, younger than she, but a descendant of the same degree from Tar-Ancalimon. So she and Tar-Ancalimon, she and Herukalmo, her husband, are third cousins. Do with that what you will. And they have a child, Alcarin, who is supposed to be the heir, but Herukalmo, after the death of Vanimelde, usurps the throne and rules in his son's place for 20 years. So it's not a legitimate reign. So he shouldn't actually be included among the number of the rulers of Númenor. But he's kind of injected in there. He goes by the name of Tar-Ancalimon, and he reigns for 20 years, dying at the age of 371 in 2657, and that's when Alcarin assumes the throne and rules for the remaining 80 years of his rightful reign. And at his death, Alcarin is 331. So Alcarin, if you count the 20 years that he should have been reigning, it's actually a total of 100 years, but without it, it's only 80 years. So we can see again, shorter and shorter and shorter. After Alcarin, we get Tar-Ancalimon, and he is the last Númenorean monarch to live longer than 300 years. We can see that even these gifts that were given early on are departing Númenor because of their breaking away from friendship with the West. So he took the name Tar-Ancalimon, for in his youth he was a great captain and won wide lands along the coasts of Middle-earth. Thus he kindled the hate of Sauron, who nonetheless withdrew, and built his power in the east, far from the shores, biding his time. In the days of Tar-Ancalimon, the name of the king was first spoken in Adunaic, and by the king's men he was called Ar-Belzalgar. All right, so Ar-Belzalgar. So no longer Tar, but they're now naming themselves in the Adunaic. So, and then last of all for this section is Tar-Ardamin. So Tar-Ardamin is the Tar-Ardamin is the ruler from 2825 through 2899. So we're approaching the end of the third millennium of the Second Age here. Tar-Ardamin rules for 74 years, and Ardamin's name means world pillar. Dies at the age of 281, and he was actually the last. So there was, before while they were using Adunaic more and more, they were still taking Quenya names, so it's kind of like dual names. And Ardamin is the last of the kings for a time to take a name in Quenya. And that will bring us to the next big section, which we're really going to focus on in the next episode, which is focusing on our Adunacor. So quick note on our image pencil sketch from this chapter. So looks like this may be Pelargir, but I suppose it could be Umbar. I'm not sure which one it is, but I will take that it's supposed to be either Umbar or Pelargir here that we're looking at in the pencil sketch that opens this particular section. Pretty cool little image there, I think. All right. Well, Númenor is now in decline, and the greatest tragedy is that its rulers don't seem to care. They are far more concerned about enriching themselves than recovering Númenor's original purpose and outlook. Even as they try to hold on to life and power, their grip on both declines. Unfortunately, it looks like nothing can stop the decay of the once great kingdom of Gift. Next time, we'll look at the reign of Ar-Adunacor, the first Númenorian ruler to take his name in Adunaic, rather than Quenya. All right, well, just wanted to hit a bit of really cool correspondence I received recently, and this is from Joe Alex SG9741 on YouTube in response to one of my recent episodes. They say, "Thank you so much for this. My tired eyes, I've also been nearsighted since I was a child, with so many other sorts of readings to deal with, need videos and audios as the best alternatives to spare my eyesight. Sharing for sure, also on my Pinterest." This user also just had some further nice things to say in response to my response to them. And then another user chimed in as well and said some very kind things. But it's just very it's these kinds of notes that are extremely rewarding, for me, because if I can make that kind of difference, even just for a few people, of helping them maybe get a little bit more into reading Tolkien when it's maybe they're more challenged to do so for a variety of reasons. That's really cool. That is just very cool. And I don't know what more I can say about that other than just I do this because I want to honor Tolkien, right? I want to honor him. I want to help others understand his writings. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is in line with what I think he would want, right? And so, I just find it super cool that that I'm able to help, even one person in the way that you describe. And so, thank you for commenting. And it's cool to know. I think another thing that this individual shared was that there's actually many others who would say the same thing, and I'm just honored to hear that. I think at the end of the day, very much appreciate the comment, and thank you so much just for watching, listening, and keep those comments coming. Enjoy the correspondence. All right. Well, don't forget to stop by TrueMythsPress.com for great merch like super styling and comfy Tolkien Road t-shirts, 2 Trees camper mugs, and signed copies of my books. Once again, that's TrueMythsPress.com. Thanks for supporting our work with your purchase. And thank you to our amazing patrons, especially the following: John R., Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, SaberSystems, Melkor27, KG, Emilio P, Jonathan D, Richard K, Robert H, Paul D, Julia, Werty, JoeBagelMan, Matt R, John W, Eugene D, Alaskan Moose 31, Chris B, Daniel S, Cory C, Carolyn S, Emiel K, Seb M, Ms. Anonymous, Andrew T, Redhawk, Shannon S, Brian O, Zeke F, James L, Chris L, Asya V, Ish of the Hammer, Teresa C, David of Pints with Jack, and Eric B. All right. Thank you so much to our amazing fellowship. Truly appreciate you all and your support. And thanks to everybody for watching and or listening. We will talk at you next time. Bye-bye.